The ghosts are moving tonight, restless, hungry. May I introduce myself? I'm Watson Pritchard. In just a minute, I'll show you the only really haunted house in the world. Since it was built a century ago, 7 people, including my brother, have been murdered in it. Since then, I've owned the house. I've only spent one night there, and when they found me in the morning, I was almost dead.
I'm Frederick Lauren, and I've rented the house on Haunted Hill tonight so that my wife can give a party. A haunted house party. She's so amusing. There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited. If any of you will spend the next 12 hours in this house, I'll give you each $10,000. Or your next of kin in case you don't survive. Ah, but here come our other guests. It was my wife's idea to have our guests come in funeral cars. She's so amusing. Her sense of humor is, shall we say, original. I dreamed up the hearse. It's empty now, but after a night in the house on Haunted Hill, who knows? This is Lance Schroeder, a test pilot, so no doubt a brave man. But don't you think you can be much braver if you're paid for it? And I happen to know that Lance needs the $10,000 I'll give him, if he's brave enough to stay all night. This is Ruth Bridges. You've no doubt read her column in the newspapers. She says her reason for coming to the party is to write a feature article on ghosts. She's also desperate for money. Gambles. You've already met Watson Pritchard, a man living in mortal fear of a house, and yet he is risking his life to spend another night here. I wonder why. He says for money. This is Dr. David Trent, a psychiatrist. He claims that my ghost will help his work on hysteria. But don't you see a little touch of greed there around the mouth and eyes? This is Nora Manning. I picked her from the thousands of people who work for me because she needed the $10,000 more than most. Supports her whole family. Isn't she pretty? The party's starting now, and you have until midnight to find the house on Haunted Hill.
Well, where is everybody?
It isn't a very warm welcome, is it?
Only the ghosts in this house are glad we're here.
Are we all strangers to each other? Don't you two know each other?
I'm afraid I don't even know your name.
I'm Nora Manning.
Lance Schroeder.
Is Frederick Lauren a friend of yours?
I've heard of him, but I've never met him.
I work for one of his companies, but I've never seen him.
I've never met the man either. Just a phone call. Do you know him?
No,
Well, then you're the only one of us who does.
I don't know him. All the details about renting the house were done by mail.
He's quite wealthy, isn't he?
Millions.
And 5 wives, I believe.
4, I think, so far.
A $50,000 party for only 5 people is a little steep, even for a millionaire.
Well, if I were going to haunt anybody, this would certainly be the house I'd do it in.
Who closed the door?
This thing's made of solid steel.
Annabelle. Our guests are here, unfortunately still alive. Is your face on yet?
Dust and dirt everywhere, and the water barely trickles. Couldn't you have had the place cleaned?
Atmosphere, darling. You know how ghosts are. They never tidy up. And that's a very fetching outfit, but hardly suitable for a party.
I'm not going to the party.
This spend-the-night ghost party was your idea, remember? Since it's going to cost me $50,000, I want you to have fun.
The party was my idea until you invited all the guests. Why all these strangers? Why none of our friends?
Friends? Do we have any friends?
No, your jealousy took care of that.
I had a reason for inviting each guest. I wanted kind of a cross-section. From psychiatrist to typist, and from drunk to jet pilot. They share one thing. They all need money. Now let's see if they're brave enough to earn it.
And you call this a party?
Could be.
Why do you always do that? It spoils the champagne.
It might explode.
Never does.
Would you guarantee that?
That isn't funny, Frederick.
Make a good headline. Playboy kills wife with champagne cork. Will you join me?
No, thank you.
Just a sip might improve your humor.
My humor is fine, thanks. And I haven't poisoned it.
It's always good to know that. Have some. You'll enjoy the party more. Go on.
Your trust is so touching. And I'm not going to the party.
Of all my wives, you're the least agreeable.
But still alive.
Would you go away for $1 million tax-free? You want it all, don't you?
I deserve it all. Your jealousy isn't tax-free, and your possessiveness is maddening.
If ever a man had grounds for divorce,
But can't prove them.
the time will come. You'll slip up one of these days,
Think so?
if I live long enough. You remember the fun we had when you poisoned me?
Something you ate, the doctor said.
Yes, arsenic on the rocks. Annabelle, you'd do it again if you thought you could get away with it, wouldn't you?
Darling, what makes you think that?
Something about you. I hear that hanging is very uncomfortable, in case you get any more ideas. Now, don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
Darling, The only ghoul in the house is you.
And don't sit up all night thinking of ways to get rid of me. It makes wrinkles.
This is what she used on my brother and her sister. Hacked them to pieces. We found parts of the bodies all over the house, in places you wouldn't think. The funny thing is the heads have never been found. Hands and feet and things like that. But no heads.
The wife, probably in a rage, threatened her husband with a knife and then, carried away by hysteria, took a swing at him and simply went on from there.
She certainly went on. How many people did she kill, Mr. Pritchard?
Only two. Her husband and her sister. No one else was here.
So there are two loose heads just floating around in here somewhere?
You can hear them at night. They whisper to each other and then cry.
Since our host isn't here, would anyone care to mix me a drink?
Certainly. What will you have?
Good evening. I'm your host, Frederick Lauren. Since we're all strangers to each other, let's get acquainted with a drink, shall we?
Mr. Lauren, I advise you to call this party off now. The ghosts are already moving, and that's a bad sign.
Let me apologize for my wife. She'll join us later. What do you have?
Scotch and.
Doctor?
I'll have the same.
Now, before the party begins, let's go over the details. The caretakers will leave at midnight, locking us in here until they come back in the morning. Once the door is locked, there's no way out. The windows have bars that a jail would be proud of, and the only door to the outside locks like a vault. There's no electricity, no phone, no one within miles, so no way to call for help.
Like a coffin.
So if any of you decide not to stay for the party, you must let me know before midnight. Of course, if you leave, I shan't be able to pay you anything.
I'm interested in your reasons for this, party. Aside from the pleasant company.
Ghosts, Doctor. I think everyone wonders what they would do if they saw a ghost. And now my wife has given us all the opportunity to find out.
Amusing. Ghosts, etc., being only creations of hysteria, your party should be a success.
Well, Pritchard here promises us genuine ghosts.
7 now. Maybe more before morning.
That's cheerful.
4 men have been murdered in this house. And 3 women.
You planned your party very well, Mr. Lauren. 4 of us are men, 3 are women. Well, a ghost for everybody.
Well, Pritchard, why don't you take us on a tour through the house and let's see what happens, huh?
See that stain? Blood. A young girl was killed here. And whatever got her wasn't human. Don't stand there.
What do you mean? Where?
It's too late. They've marked you.
Ridiculous. The roof probably leaks.
Oh, that must be what it is. Who would want to haunt me?
I would say any self-respecting male ghost.
I hope it doesn't come back.
Well, Mr. Pritchard, you're the life of the party.
Oh, he hasn't even started yet. Wasn't there a man who threw his wife into a wine vat or something?
That was in the cellar. There's been a murder almost every place in this house. All this belonged to a Mr. Norton, who didn't die here. He was electrocuted later. Mr. Norton did a good deal of experimenting with wines, but his wife didn't think it was any good. So he filled the vat with acid and threw her in. She was supposed to stay down. But the bones came up. It's a funny thing. But none of the murders here were just ordinary. Just shooting or stabbing. They've all been sort of wild, violent, and different.
Look out!
God, she didn't fall in.
You mean there's still acid in there?
Destroys everything with hair and flesh. Just leaves the bones. My, it's dry and dusty down here.
Well, there's a cure for that upstairs. Come on.
How'd you get invited to this party? No. Oh, go on. I mean, what did he tell you?
Mr. Lawrence said everybody'd get $10,000.
But he didn't say anything about being locked in.
No.
He just made the deal with me on the phone, but nothing about having to stay.
Aren't you going to stay?
If I don't, I lose $10,000.
I'm going to stay, too. $10,000.
Yeah. You believe in ghosts?
I don't know.
Well, I agree with what that doc says. You can spook yourself. I've done it in planes. Seen things that weren't really there. Or were they? What are you going to do with your $10,000? If we get it.
What do you mean, if we get it? Won't he pay us if we stay?
Ah, sure he will. 10,000 is no more to him than a nickel is to us.
We were in an automobile accident. Now I'm the only one in the family who can make any money.
Boy, I've never seen so many doors. Closet? Bottles.
Does it go anywhere? Lance! Lance!
I mean?
Please, come on.
Did she say Lance is gone? Gone where?
We'll have to break it down. It's locked.
Locked?
all right?
Nothing that money won't cure. I must have bumped my head.